Chapter 16, Part 2. 2:20 p.m. I don't want this case to end. I really don't. Just when I think things can't get any stranger or more exciting, a new chapter lands on my lap. I think all this might have just given Michelle Goldberg enough inspiration for her next article and blog, too. The bluff into the building couldn't have gone any smoother. A simple call from reception to her office, an instruction to sign in and wear a paper badge, and I was in. I took the lift to the 11th floor and was told to wait in the foyer until Mrs. Goldberg came to meet me. I sat, or collapsed into, a black sofa near the lifts. She appeared from a nearby office and welcomed me with a warm smile. She was quite a beautiful lady. I tried to stand up to shake her hand, but embarrassingly I collapsed back into the chair. She leaned forward and offered her hand, pulling me up to my feet. As first impressions go, it was hardly what I had in mind, but she just laughed and told me, "You aren't the first to be swallowed up by that chair." She led me through to her office and sat behind her desk. I explained who I was and why I was there. A journalist working for the MEN, running a feature on a famous New York journalist, Norman Templeton, who had family links with Manchester and Salford. I also explained that I was looking into the life of another expat, Mr. Ernie Grimshaw, who Mr. Templeton had coincidentally met and wrote about back in the 50s. I think she believed me. It was only half a lie anyway. I asked if she was able to unearth anything from this time to help with my research, and she said she was more than happy to help. She called in a secretary, a woman in her late 50s, I guess, to help her use the search facility on the computer. The name Norman Templeton unsurprisingly came up many times, 1,158 to be precise. Most related to his old articles, but also a few articles that were written about him after his retirement. More surprisingly was the rest of the name search for Ernie Grimshaw. He appeared on the New York Times archive database 49 times in 11 different articles. The two men's names were mentioned together in 5 of them. Michelle told me she could print off those articles, which was very generous of her. I asked her if she would search for another name, Robbie McNulty, or Robert McNulty. His name appeared 43 times, and also appeared in the 5 articles with Norman and Ernie. This alone was absolutely fascinating, but the piece de resistance was yet to be revealed. Michelle asked her secretary to collect the printouts for her, and I was offered more coffee. We chatted for a few minutes about my thoughts on New York and her work for the newspaper before her secretary reappeared with the printouts. They'd been printed off in date order with the oldest article first. It was the one Rebecca and Annabel had talked about, with the headline, "Incredible Feat." There were they were there, Ernie and Robbie, all smiles, in the grainy black and white photograph. This was the first time I had seen the adult Ernie. If I'm ever lucky enough to catch up with him, I wonder if I will even recognize him. The article told of the tale of 2 boys and their unlikely start in business, and the popularity of their venture. Nothing out of the ordinary, but a pleasant read nonetheless. The caption underneath the photograph used their Sunday names, which made me chuckle. Ernest Grimshaw and Robert McNulty take a much-needed break to have their photograph taken. They both looked so happy, young men with the world at their incredible feet. The second article and its headline and subheading smacked me right between the eyes. "Street murder linked with the mafia," it said, and "Young Irishman thought to be the latest victim of the mafia protection racket." The piece by Norman Templeton told of the murder of Robbie McNulty, a popular and hard-working Irishman from New York's East Side. His body was found badly beaten and bruised, following a vicious attack by 2 unidentified men on the 27th of August 1954. It said that McNulty, a small local business owner, was brutally attacked and left for dead by 2 men. The article went on to say what a great man Robbie was, and how, in partnership with good friend Ernie Grimshaw, had made incredible feat of the most popular shoeshine business in New York. The motive for the murder had not been established, but it was thought to be related to a protection racket run by one of the New York's notorious mob families, the Gambinos. It was suggested that Mr. McNulty had refused to give in to their demands for money and paid for it with his life. The third article, under the headline Mob Menace, exposed the extent of the Gambinos' control over the East Side districts through fear, menace, and extreme violence. Ernie and Robbie were named in the article as one of the few businessmen who were willing to speak out against the family and their methods. Robbie had evidently paid the ultimate price for his stance against these criminal mercenaries. The fourth article, written by a different journalist, Sam Thompson, under the headline A Bullet in the Post, also named the three men, but this time the Mafia had turned their attention to Norman. He had received a death threat in an anonymous letter for his haranguing and obsession with exposing the crimes of the Mafia families, particularly the Gambinos. The threats were taken seriously by the New York Police Department and the New York Times, and it was big news at that time. But Norman would not be silenced, and in the fifth article, with the headline Victory for the Working Man, it was clear that the Gambinos had decided it would not be worth drawing unwanted media attention to themselves, and had slipped back away into the shadows. The protection rackets ceased in that area, and relative calm returned to the streets. People were allowed to get back on with their daily lives without the threat of Mafia violence hanging over them. Templeton again highlighted the work of Ernie and his stand against the bully. He had lost his best friend through it all, but hadn't buckled. He had received numerous threats too, but thankfully they came to nothing, in no small thanks to the customers and the local community, who stood shoulder to shoulder with him. One man was quoted as saying, "We told Ernie, if they come for him, they'll have to fight us all, the whole borough. We had lost Robbie, and we weren't going to lose Ernie too." In the article, there was a picture of Norman sat in one of the shoeshine chairs, with Ernie kneeling down in front of him, holding a brush and smiling at the camera. Michelle told me what little she knew about the Mafia influence. The Gambinos were one of 5 Mafia families who controlled New York and surrounding area at that time. They had a fearsome reputation and were thought to be responsible for dozens of murders. Racketeering would have been just one of the many crimes they were associated with, and probably one of the least lucrative compared to their other criminal activities, but they probably considered it important in order to help maintain their reputation of power and control. I asked about Norman and his work with the paper. Michelle had heard of his name, but knew nothing about him before today. His secretary, on the other hand, did. "Forgive me for interrupting," she said, interrupting us, "but I have worked here for 25 years. Mr. Templeton was before my time, but I do know of him. He was quite the celebrity, and his picture is in our own Hall of Fame in the lobby. He was the Larry King of his day. I'll show you on the way out if you like." I thanked Michelle for giving up her time for me. She collected up the articles and popped them into a plastic wallet for me. "You've certainly given me some food for thought, Mr. Brunskill. I think Norman might need another article about him now. What do you say? Have a safe journey back to Manchester, and if you need anything else, just call." She handed me her card. Her secretary, who I found out was called Elaine, took me down in the lifts. In the 20 seconds it took to get to the ground floor, I found out that her husband was called Hank. She had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, and a poodle called Fifi. We arrived back in the reception area, and she led me to a wall covered in framed pictures. Suited men beamed back at me, holding copies of the newspaper. They were all of journalists, past and present. Hardly any women, I noticed. I wondered how long it would be before the beautiful Michelle had her picture up on the wall. Elaine scanned the pictures. "I know he's here somewhere," she said. "I'm sure there's a couple of him. It was big news back then. Look through the black and white ones." I scanned them without really knowing what I was looking for. But then she called out, "Here he is, Paul. 2 photographs together." She pointed at one. The caption at the bottom read, Norman Templeton puts pen to paper. The picture showed a beaming Norman signing a new contract with the New York Times. He had a look of Sean Connery about him, certainly a handsome and imposing man in his youth. Elaine pointed to the second picture. It showed him holding a beer in one hand and a newspaper in the other. It was taken in 1989, 2 years before he died. He was still a handsome man then, but the years had taken their toll. I looked closely at his face and tried to imagine what he was like to talk to. From what had been told already, he appeared to have been a strong and determined, brave man. The caption below simply said, Norman Templeton enjoys a drink in his favourite bar, 1989. I was all set to leave, when suddenly that thunderbolt shook me to the core again. Behind Norman, in the picture, was a bar. In big, clear gold letters on a bottle green background was his name, Ernie's.